living in Dublin, and they're involved in it. Many of the leaders of that are not even from Dublin either, so I mean it's not really a Dublin affair. It happens in Dublin, but a lot of people from around the country are involved in it. My estimation is that there's about 24 people from Kildare involved in the Rising on the Republican side. Then you have a couple of dozen people involved in the Rising on the British Army side, because you have a lot of people from Kildare are in the British Army. And as soon as the Rising breaks out, they rush troops from the Curragh and from Newbridge up to Dublin. 3 of the British fatalities are Kildare men, born and raised in County Kildare, and they are killed fighting for the British Army. There's only one person that's born in Kildare that is killed fighting on the Republican side, and his father was a British soldier and he was born in the Curragh. So you have all different types of contradictions in the whole thing. Several of the civilians killed in the Rising are from Kildare, are living and working in Kildare. One of them included in the North King Street massacre, where British troops bayoneted and killed 15 men and boys when they just lose one of themselves. And he's from Selbridge, Peter Connolly. Another fella is working as a cart here. He has a cart, and the rebels use it as a barricade. And when he tries to retrieve it, after several warnings, he's shot dead. There's Michael Cameron from Timahoe. There's several of the children have Kildare connections as well. We know now that there's 40 children killed. One of the youngest, his father was from Ballymore Eustace, who had been previously killed in the First World War. So this was a double tragedy for the family. So again, it's not really a Dublin affair. There's huge involvement from every county in the country, and if it's researched by someone like myself from each county, we'll have a wonderful record of the Rising told from every perspective, even from the British side as well, because one of the main players in it who takes a surrender or brings a surrender document to all the Republican garrisons along with Nurse Farrell is Henry de Courcy Wheeler from Robertstown. So he features prominently throughout the whole thing, and he's there. He's actually related to Countess Margaret's then as well. When Countess Margaret surrenders, he asks her, does she want to lift in his car, because it's a cousin of his wife, and she says, no, I'd rather walk with my men. So she goes with the garrison from St. Stephen's Green. So there's some great stories of that time as well. There's a wonderful story about St. Stephen's Green is that they're fighting in the green, and it stops every day so the groundsmen can go and feed the ducks in the pond or whatever. Everyone stops shooting. Let your man go and feed the ducks, and then everyone starts shooting. You don't really hear this anywhere at all. But we'll start with the leaders, or the proclamation signatories. Tom Clark, probably called the father of Republicans, the father of Ireland, really. Again, his father was a British soldier. He was born in the Isle of Wight in Britain, and then he returns with his father to Ireland, and eventually to settle in Tyrone. He considers himself a Tyrone man, even though he is not. Basically, he's not really. He's one of those Irishmen like James Durney, who was born elsewhere and ends up in Ireland. He spent 15 years in jail in one of the worst conditions ever of penal servitude. And when he surrenders, he gladly faces the firing squad. He says, because he didn't want to go back to prison. He said he couldn't do prison again. Him in Kent then as well, his brother is killed in the First World War serving as a British soldier. And he's related to Ned Daly, then another one of the garrison as well. We have Sean McDermott, Joseph Plunkett, and of course P.H. Pearce, Padraig Pearce, who a couple of years previously was a Home Ruler, a nationalist, not a Republican at all. He was spotted doing a talk or a lecture or a speech about Robert Emmet, and Tom Clark seen him and said, he's good, we're going to get him. And he'll fire people up, and that's exactly what he does. And then at the O'Donoghue Rossa funeral, then he comes into his own when he makes that famous speech, the fools, they've left us are feeling dead. And this is what he is, he's a great orator. And as commanders, most of these as militarists, they're not very good, they have no experience really. So the leaders of the Rising, very few of them have military experience. James Connolly would have, because again he was in the British Army. He was born in the worst slums in Glasgow, and then he ends up in Dublin during the Great Lockout. He's in America for many years. Some of his children are born in America. He struggles the whole time against capitalism, against imperialism, and then he ends up before a British firing squad, strapped to a chair. A great idea. We were talking to an artist recently, Paul Woods, is doing some artwork as well, and we were talking about the iconic image of Pierce, or of Connolly in a chair being brought out in a stretcher, put in a chair and then shot, and the chair just falls over and Connolly falls over. So a great idea then for painting then as well, you know, of just a chair and maybe blood or, you know, sandbags, whatever behind. And then Thomas MacDonagh. But without people like John Devine, who was born in Kill, Greenhills in Kill, without people like this financing the Rising, there never would be a Rising. So one of the great financiers of the 1916 Rising is John Devine, and he's a great Clare connection, of course. He was in jail then as well for organising the Fenians, and he's given a choice then of leaving for America. He goes to America in 1872 with O'Donovan Rossa and Thomas Luby, and all these other Fenians. He end up in America then plotting. And it's said that from the time he wakes up in the morning to the time he goes asleep at night, he plots against England. This is the only thing he lives for. He doesn't get married, he doesn't do anything except plot against overthrow of Britain. And when O'Donovan Rossa dies, Tom Clark rings up De Valera, or rings up Devine in New York and tells him, or Devine rings him in New York, and Clark says, send this body home, because he knows it's going to be a big propaganda exercise. And Devine sends £20 over to buy a plot for him in Glasnevin, and from there then that's where it really all starts. And again, there's trees of bravery, because we have to have women in it. We have to throw a women on woman then as well into the mix. Trees of bravery from Kildare as well. And she's a great poet, a nationalist poet, and a friend of Pierce. She comes over to visit Pierce. She meets him in 1915, and before the Rising. And she writes all these, you know, the old Bob Rowan and all these fabulous poems that the Irish Americans go misty-eyed when they read them, you know. So she's a friend of all the leaders, and again raises funds for the Rising. But the Rising is planned for Easter Sunday, and we know then it doesn't happen. It happens on Easter Monday because Owen MacNeill has a countermand in order, so there's no Rising to go ahead. But this is an order for mobilisation. This is in Emerald Square. The Dublin 4th Battalion is ordered to mobilise on the 23rd of the 4th, 1916, which we know is Easter Sunday. It doesn't happen until the 24th, Easter Monday, and by that stage only maybe a quarter of people turn up. 1,600 in total turn up, men, women and children, because we have young boys going out to fight as well. So again, you know, just probably a good image or something for, I like it as a print or anything like that. But this guy, Tom Bourne, from Dublin, well, he's originally from Carrick-on-Shannon, but he's living in Dublin most of his life, apart from the time he's in South Africa working as a miner. And then he enrolls to fight the British with the Boers, and he's nicknamed the Boer then when he comes back. He's Tom the Boer Byrne. And he comes to Kildare to organise the Irish volunteers in Kildare. He comes with the orders for the Rising. He meets up with people like Tom Harris, who was from Prosperous originally, but lived in Carey. He was a TD, a Fianna Fáil TD then for many years afterwards. And they go to Maynooth, where Donald O'Buchala is commander of the Maynooth Company, the Irish Volunteers. And this is his shop front that was taken in the 1980s. But he had a yard at the back, and originally he put his name on a card. He used to deliver supplies, hardware supplies to people, and he wrote his name in Irish on his card, O'Buchala. And he signs the 1901 census and the 1911 census as O'Buchala, which is illegal because you're supposed to fill it in English, because the English tell you you're supposed to do these things. But he wouldn't do that, so he filled it out in Irish. and he put it on his card, and he was summoned for having his name in Irish over his shop, and summoned for having his name in Irish on the card. And the person to defend him was Padraig Pearse as his barrister. First and only case he ever had, because he never was a practicing barrister. He was a barrister, but he never done much practice. And he defends O'Buchala in court. O'Buchala is found guilty, and he's ordered to pay 15 shillings or something like that in a fine, which he refuses to do. So they go into his shop then, the RIC sergeant goes into the shop, takes a roll of material that's worth X amount of shillings and brings it off, and brings it to the court then to sell it at the court then so they can get the money. A man comes in then, buys it, brings it down to a O'Buchala shop and hands it back to him. That's how it works. But these were the type of people that were organised to fight the British Empire. And at the time in 1916, O'Buchala is 50 years of age, and he has 8 children. His wife is very, very sick. She's terminally ill actually. She dies maybe a year or two later. And on Easter Monday, he gathered his men with Tom Harris and Tom Moran, and there's 15 of them in total. And a bread man had come to Maynooth on the morning of Monday morning and told him that there was shooting in Dublin. So he assumed that the rising was on. He got on his bike and he cycled from Maynooth into Dublin, and he arrives at the Liffey Derra, near where the Royal Barracks or Collins Barracks is now, and there's sniping going on. And he discovers that the rising is on. And he cycles back to Maynooth then as well. So that's 15 miles up and 15 miles back on a bike. And then he gathers the men together in the yard, 15 of them all total, and they walk to Dublin. Walk from Maynooth all along the canal and up by the railway and into Glasnevin. And they stay overnight in Glasnevin to have a rest and sleep. And then the next morning, Tuesday morning, they walk down to the GPO and they walk into the GPO. And Conley is there waiting for him, and Pearse, and they shake hands with him, give them cigars, a cup of tea and a bun, and then they're involved in the rising for the whole time. So, I mean, a man of 50 years of age, when you think of it, if you were asked to walk to the end of the town, he'd be complaining. And he cycles first and then he walks back and forward. But this is the Maynooth group here, taken in 1966, those that had survived. This is O'Buchala there. He later becomes Governor General of the country. He's installed by, it's a political ply by De Valera to get rid of the governorship, and he installs O'Buchala as the last Governor General in the country. And the Governor General was appointed by the British government as a liaison to attend meetings and all that, and functions and all that, and he just refused to do it until the position became obsolete because there was no point having it anymore, and they got rid of it completely. This is Tom Harris, and the rest of them. So picture that Hill 16, that's Hill 16 in 1966. So that was the 50th anniversary of it. So the countermanding order, MacNeill's countermanding order comes to Kildare, and like everywhere else there's confusion and not many people mobilised. There's 5 companies in Kildare at the time, because the Irish volunteers had split previously over John Redmond's call to fight for Britain. So there's only a handful of volunteers within the county, and they all mobilise, but when they get no orders they don't know what to do, so they don't go. Don't go to Dublin to fight, and it's the same all around the country. But this is Code 45, and if you're thinking of an idea, this one's probably for you, Andy, because we men always think of guns or something like that. So, like he's saying, this is the type of thing you want to do.
You're standing around that's a number of years.
2 things. That's what I think. So, guns are always good for paintings or publicity or whatever. But this is an actual .45 Colt automatic that was used, or was actually used, alright, and it was owned by one of the members of Kill Company. IRA, and a painting then of course of a little bit glamorous now of the proclamation in O'Connell Street. And Pearse comes out and he reads the proclamation to a group of people who are just passing by or something like that, and not many people pay attention. It's said later on that under, as we can see, Nelson's pillar here, Tom Clark later reads the proclamation again to a group of people, and you know, nobody really knows what's going on, they don't know what's happening. apart from the, and most of the volunteers, in fairness, don't really know what's going on either. Because I mean, they were told that it was manoeuvres that were going on. They weren't told that they're actually going out to fight and take on Britain and win. So a lot of them are saying, you know, what's really going on. The Maynooth group, in fairness, do know what's going on, and they know that they were given a choice. About 20 of them mobilised all together, and they were given a choice, saying that we're going into Dublin and we're going to be fighting, and we're possibly going to get killed, or we're going to get captured, and we're not going to come back. And two of them went off to say goodbye to the mother and never came back. And another fella had to be, he was older than O'Bucala, and they didn't want him to go because he was pretty badly off, and they didn't want him to go, but he forced himself to go. And then they went down to the college to get absolution from the priest before they went, which he refused to do. And then he said he would give them not general absolution, a type of absolution. He didn't agree with them. And then one of the men there decided to join them as well, and he went with them, the gardener that was working there. And then a captain of the National Volunteers, who would have been in opposition to O'Bucala, he decided to join them as well, and he had no weapon. But because the other lads didn't come back, they had a spare weapon, and they gave it to him as well. So I consider them very, very brave men to do all that. Our proclamation, then again, another great image. Probably one of the greatest documents ever written. You know, it can be compared to the Declaration of Independence, the American Declaration of Independence, or even the French Declaration of Independence and the Birth of the Republic. It's up there with them. And the wording of it, if you read it as well, how relevant is it today is another question. And many of the schools will be doing projects on the proclamation, bullets, their boots, everything you have to pay for yourself. And we're talking about working class people that didn't have a whole lot of money to put food on the table, so you couldn't go out really and buy yourself a fancy uniform. What you did was you paid your money in every week. You might have paid a penny in or something until you had enough for a uniform, or you had enough for a rifle, and then you had to supply yourself. So these are volunteers. They've all volunteered to do this, and all have to pay for their own weapons and that. And again, you can see they're not that well dressed. And this again is another photograph taken. There's two photographs taken within the GPO that period, which is fantastic in itself, that it actually had a camera in there. And the quality of the photographs are quite good now for that time. And these are again two volunteers with their bandoliers, their rifles, their bayonets, and again not dressed in uniform. Another painting then of O'Connell Bridge, or Sackville Street as it was known then, after or during the Rising then again. And that's the Linen Hall Barracks, which was burnt down by the garrison of the Four Courts, who was, the barracks was quite inadequately held, and the volunteers stormed and took it over, but couldn't occupy it because they didn't have enough men, so the best thing to do then was just to burn it down. Clanwilliam House then, where the volunteers held up reinforcements from Kingstown or Dunleary, as we know it, coming in. The greatest casualties in the Rising was inflicted here by 12 men in positions on houses covering the road and covering the bridge, and killed under 234 British soldiers in one afternoon. And all the British soldiers kept doing was charging, as they did in the Somme or at Ypres or whatever. Went over the top and just charged, and kept charging, and they just kept shooting until their ammunition ran out, and the British stormed the two houses and killed several of them. Again, a better idea of the garrisons. South Dublin Union, which is James's hospital, and then we can condemn the volunteers then even for occupying a place that had so many people. There's something like 5,000 destitute people living in this area alone, and several houses. There's a nurse killed, there's several civilians killed, British soldiers killed, volunteers killed. I think 15 volunteers in total killed in this area. And again, occupying an area that there was many civilians in is tantamount to war crimes, and how he wouldn't be allowed to get away with it at the time. Dublin Castle they failed to seize because they didn't have enough men, and they could have easily taken it. City Hall was taken, Jacob's Factory, College of Surgeons and Stephen's Green, or Countess Margaret, I suppose. This was where the troops were massacred coming in from Kingstown. Boland's Factory, where Devil Air was. The GPO, the four courts for Ned Daly. Kingsbridge Station, where much of the British troops came from the Curragh and Newbridge as reinforcements. Then concentrated on here and then attacked there until isolated the GPO and eventually just batter it down. And this young fella, Charlie Darcy, was killed in the City Hall fighting. 15 years of age, he was fighting with the Irish Volunteers and he was killed in action. So some of the children that we see were fighting, we think of child soldiers in Africa, you know, in the last couple of decades, and yet we were training children to go out and fight from the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever. The people of the slums then, of course, took advantage of the, especially if there were no police around, where they could take stuff. We won't say steal, we say they would take stuff out of shops and that. They could equip themselves, they could get firewood, they could, sweets were a big thing, ties, because all these children had to get out and get into a tie shop and they don't have to pay for anything. And these would not have ties every Christmas or every week, as children would have now. So the people of the slums saw it as a great advantage then to take what they could. There was a great story from a fellow from Naas, a gentleman from Naas who was interviewed, and the newspapers of the day did not interview people that were not of a different social class. So it was either middle class people or gentlemen were interviewed at the time. And he said he remembered looking, and a young fellow came out of a shop and he had completely attired himself in golfing gear. And he dropped the ball and he hit it down Sackville Street or O'Connell Street. And he had a pair of binoculars and he took it out and he had a look. And he looked down to see where the ball went. And then he popped another one out. And this is in the middle of the rising. So pubs, of course, were a lot of liquor was taken out of the pubs then by the local people as well. Well, one of the saddest photographs I have in my own collection was given to me by a woman from Naas, and this is John Foster. He was with his mother and his brother. On Easter Monday they were passing the four courts, and his mother spotted her brother building a barricade, and she said to him, "When are you going to stop playing soldiers and cop yourself on?" And he says, he was one of the volunteers who was dressed in a volunteer uniform. And he says, "You better get out of here." He says, "There's going to be trouble." And she headed down around the corner towards Father Matthew Hall, and she had the two children in the pram, as it would have done years ago. They had one on one side and one at the top end. And with that, a troop of British Lancers on horseback came up, and the volunteers opened fire on them. And the child was hit in the crossfire, and he was killed and shot in the head, just as Father Matthew Hall. And it's disputed who shot him, but it doesn't matter, he ended up dead by an accidental gunshot. And he's the youngest victim of the rising, at 2 years and 10 months. And that's him. And his father was from Ballymore Eustace, who was married to a Dublin woman. He was working in Guinness's brewery, and he had been an ex-British soldier, and he was called back to the colours then when the war broke out. And he was killed in Ypres in April 1915, and then his son was killed April 1916, a little over a year after in the Easter Rising. But it was the reason why Pearse decided to surrender. Was he witnessed, while they were in Moore Street after evacuating the GPO and had a new headquarters in Moore Street, he witnessed a man and his wife and teenage daughter coming out under a white flag. Their pub, the flag pub in Dublin, had been hit and was on fire. And they came out to surrender, tried to get out, but a machine gun by a British machine gunner shot the three of them down and killed them. And Pearse witnessed this and he said, "No more." He said, "This is too much, I can't do this anymore." So they decided to surrender. And it was the killing of civilians, really, that prompted Pearse to surrender. And here we see him at the the top of Parnell Street, or Great Britain Street as it was known then, and of course the famous photograph of Nurse O'Farrell airbrushed out of Irish history. And she says that she stepped back when she seen the camera herself, but it was actually, there's different photographs of it, and you can see her a little bit more prominently, but she was actually put out, and at that time there was no, there was no computer or anything that you can cut things out. It was physically put out with a blade and cut her out of the photograph completely. And then, if you notice these, they redrew them then as well to make them more prominent, and even Pierce was redrawn and not, just to make the photograph look more authentic. That's the revolver of Henry de Courcy Wheeler, who with Nurse O'Farrell went delivering Pierce and Connolly's surrender document saying that we were surrendered, and signed by Pierce and Connolly. And they delivered. He came up from the Curragh to Dublin, and with British reinforcements, and his aide-de-camp then to General Lowe, and he sent around all the garrisons with this surrender document. This is his revolver, his Smith & Wesson revolver, that he gave as a gift to the Irish Free State in the 1920s, and it's in the National Archives in Dublin. Again, a nice image if anyone is interested in reproducing. This is Countess Margaret at the head of her men, as we learned earlier. She volunteered to march at the head of her group with Michael Mallon. Michael Mallon is executed, and Margaret is spared because she's a woman, really. This is her mugshot, or police photograph of her arrest. And the rising affects people in every different type of way. This is a pass being given to two people from Nurney and Kildare to leave Dublin. They had been in Dublin, because a lot of people that went to Dublin for the weekend. It was the long weekend, don't forget. It was a bank holiday weekend. People went up to Dublin at the time to stay for the weekend, or they went to the race at Ferryhouse, went out by train from Dublin to Ferryhouse and back, or whatever. So there was a lot of people, a lot of country people in Dublin at the time, and these wanted to return back to Kildare and had to get a pass signed by the British to get through the cordon. But photographs then of Dublin in ruins. This is the GPO, the shell of the GPO, Nelson's Pillar, as we know, and this is a flagpole here where the flag of the Irish Republic flew from. But the GPO was completely gutted, and just different pictures of Dublin after the rise. The Hotel Metropole beside it, which was completely burned down. These were all these were pounded by artillery using incendiary shells, which set the buildings ablaze. That's Liberty Hall that had been shelled by the gunboat Helga. And this was taken from the top of Nelson's Pillar, just giving us an idea of all the damage done to Dublin. There was, I don't know how many square miles was actually ruined, but George Bernard Shaw remarked that they should have bombed more of Dublin and levelled all the slums entirely in it while they were at it. It would have been the best thing they ever done. And again, another shot from Nelson's Pillar. This guy is Seamus O'Kelly, who was editor of the Leinster Leader. And his brother, he had moved to Dublin at the time, and his brother was editor of the Leinster Leader during 1916, but he was arrested on the Thursday or Friday of Easter week, and he was brought to the Curragh with a lot of Kildare people that were arrested, that the police and military went out and just picked them all up, that there were known Irish volunteers. So he assumed editorship of the Leinster Leader until his brother was released a couple of months later. And this one here is Donald O'Bucala's cell in Knutsford Detention Centre, which was a former British Army barracks which had been converted to a detention centre for military prisoners. And this was actually drawn in June 1916 by this I can't remember his name, but it says an apartment in Knutsford Hotel. So this is his cell, and you can see it's quite basic. This is his bedding, his toilet, his fresh water, his you know, you have what we remember as a pole pot at the time, which was that's the basic toilet you have. And this is his bed, which is put down, and his bedroll, which is rolled out during the day. But that's all you have. You have no chair, you have no table, or nothing in a cell. This is the conditions. And again, this is too high even for you to climb up and see. But you have a bit of light coming in. There's no lights in the cells or nothing like that. You might have a candle. Or, some of them would have had gas light. But pretty grim if you're ever visiting Kilmainham, and you can go into the cells and have a look and think, I mean, how long would you last in here? For how many years, how many hours would you even last? The likes of Tom Tark, 15 years in a cell like that, and they weren't allowed to speak to anyone for 15 years. So you wonder why he wanted to be executed. This is Uncle Douglas' grave in Lara Bryant Cemetery in Maynooth. But when the prisoners returned, and this is the return of Countess Markowitz at Liberty Hall in June 1917, the sentenced prisoners were returned in June 1917. Those who hadn't been sentenced had been interned. Interned means they can arrest you and hold you for as long as they like and let you out whenever they like. But if you were a sentenced prisoner, which the likes of Markowitz was, instead of being executed, she was sentenced to life imprisonment or whatever. And these were all returned in June of 1917, the last of the 1916 prisoners. And this is a Fina Erin, again, the youth group marching at Hodenstown, taken in 1912 or 1913, and with Bulmer Hobson in the lead. And that's heading out towards Hodenstown from Sallins. On the medal then, 1916, 1966, this was the 50th anniversary, and all survivors of the Rising were given these medals in 1966. So again, another image if we're looking for something for a print. And again, the Arbour Hill, of course, where the executed leaders are buried. They weren't handed over to their families, they were buried in quicklime in a military grave, right, within the military prison. So that's the end of our little talk.
Thank you very much.